They put up a gate where my road had been for 70 years, and they did it like they were installing a mailbox, like it was just another home improvement project. Problem was, that road wasn't just some driveway. It was the only way in and out of my land. Now I don't usually start stories this way, but if you're going to understand why I ended up standing behind a bulldozer at 7 in the morning with a sheriff watching and a court order folded in my back pocket, you need to understand the road. I own 80 acres of timberland up in northern New Hampshire, just shy of the Vermont line, the kind of land where the trees grow straight and tall and the winters are honest. I bought it when I was 32, back when I still had more ambition than money. Over the years, it paid me back through selective logging contracts and a couple of long-term hunting leases that covered my taxes, and then some. It's not flashy wealth, not yacht money, but it's steady, and steady is what I've always preferred. The land sits deep. No paved access. No scenic byway. Just one dirt road that cuts in from the county highway, winds through 3 separate parcels, and finally reaches my boundary line. That road's been there since the 1950s when the original timber company carved it out to haul spruce. Every deed since then, including mine, has referenced the same thing in plain language. Permanent, non-exclusive, unrestricted right-of-way for ingress, egress, and timber removal. Unrestricted. That word matters. For 15 years, nobody questioned it. The older folks who owned the front parcels understood how things worked. We'd wave when we passed, sometimes stop and chat about mud season or bear sightings. I kept the road graded twice a year at my own expense because heavy logging trucks don't play nice with spring thaw, and nobody complained. Then came Caleb and Marissa Whitaker. They were from Connecticut, tech money from what I heard, sold a startup, decided they were done with city life. They bought the very first parcel at the entrance to the road, paid cash, closed in 10 days. Folks in town were impressed and suspicious in equal measure. When you show up with that kind of speed and money in a rural place, people notice. First time I met Caleb, I was hauling out a load of white pine. He stepped out of a brand new SUV, wearing boots that had never seen mud, and a flannel shirt that still had crease lines in it. "Hey there," he said, smiling like we were already friends. "You live back here?" "Own the timber at the end," I told him. "Use the road pretty regular." He nodded, asked a few questions about hunting season, snow depth, the usual small talk. Seemed friendly enough. Marissa waved from the passenger seat, but didn't get out. I remember thinking they'd either fall in love with the place or be gone in 3 winters. 3 weeks later, I came down the road after checking boundary markers, and I hit the brakes so hard my thermos went flying. There was a gate, not a chain across 2 posts, not some temporary farm barrier. An 8-foot-tall steel gate anchored between stone pillars, keypad entry on one side, motion cameras mounted up high like watchful eyes. Fresh gravel packed around the base. It looked like the entrance to a private estate, not a shared access road in the middle of the woods. For a second, I just sat there with the engine idling, staring at it. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Surely they wouldn't. Then I saw the small sign bolted to the stone. Private property. No trespassing. I pulled out my phone and called Caleb. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man," he said, cheerful as ever. "What's up?" "I'm looking at what's up," I said. "You've got a gate across the access road." "Oh yeah," he replied, like we were discussing patio furniture. "We just had it installed. Marissa's been nervous about people driving through. You know how it is." "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Actually, I don't. That's my right of way. You can't block it." "It's not blocked," he said quickly. "I'll give you the code. It's just for security." Totally reasonable. And that was the moment something shifted in me. Not because of the gate itself, but because of the tone. Like he was granting me permission to use what was already mine. "Caleb," I said, "my easement isn't conditional. I don't need a code to access my own land." There was a pause on the line, just long enough for the friendliness to cool. "We paid a lot for privacy," he said finally. "The code is a fair compromise." Compromise. I remember looking at that keypad and thinking how strange it was that a handful of numbers could represent such a big misunderstanding. "I'm not compromising on a right that's written into my deed," I said. "That gate needs to come down." "Well," he replied, and the warmth was gone now, replaced by something firmer. "We'll have to disagree." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. I backed the truck up, turned around, and drove straight into town. Not to the hardware store. Not to the diner. To see Henry Dalton, the attorney who'd handled my closing years ago. Henry's office sits above the feed supply, second floor, smells faintly of paper and old coffee. He's been practicing property law in that county for 4 decades, seen more boundary disputes than most people see birthdays. He pulled my file without asking why I was there. Small towns are like that. What did they do? He asked, sliding on his reading glasses. Put up a gate, I said. Across the easement. He let out a slow breath and flipped to the relevant page, running a finger under the language. Permanent, unrestricted, he murmured. That's clean. So they can't. I asked. No, he said simply. They can't. And as I sat there in that cramped office, listening to the hum of the old window unit, I realized this wasn't about a gate anymore. It was about whether a piece of paper still meant something in a place that prided itself on handshake deals and neighborly respect. Henry looked up at me. You want to ask nicely, he said. Or you want to do this properly? I didn't hesitate. Properly. Henry didn't rush. That's one thing I've always respected about him. In the city, lawyers seem to thrive on urgency, on theatrics. Henry thrives on patience. He drafted a formal notice that afternoon, clean and direct, no chest pounding, no threats beyond what the law already provided. It stated, in plain language, that the gate constituted an unlawful obstruction of a recorded right-of-way and demanded removal within 10 days. We give them a chance to fix it, he said, signing the letter. Judges like that. I drove home feeling steadier than I had that morning. Not calm exactly, but anchored. The paper trail was clear. The language was clear. I wasn't asking for anything new. I just wanted the road back the way it had always been. For a few days, nothing happened. Then I started noticing construction trucks. Big flatbeds hauling lumber. Concrete mixers. A landscaping crew with trailers. Caleb and Marissa weren't just building a cabin. They were building a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows, wraparound deck, imported stone. I heard from a guy at the hardware store they'd hired an architect out of Boston. And every one of those trucks used the same dirt road I maintained. By the end of the second week, the surface was chewed up. Deep ruts where the gravel had been pushed aside, soft shoulders collapsing into mud. I called Caleb again. You planning to help with maintenance? I asked, keeping it businesslike. Your crews are tearing up the grade. My lawyer advised me not to discuss shared costs until the access situation is resolved, he replied. There it was again. That shift in tone. Polished. Distant. Access situation, I repeated. You mean the illegal gate? I mean the disputed interpretation, he said. I actually laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. There's nothing to interpret, I said. It says unrestricted. We'll let the court decide, he answered. And that was when I understood something important. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about Marissa feeling nervous. It was about control. They had paid a lot of money for what they believed was seclusion, and the idea that someone else had a legal claim cutting straight through that privacy probably felt like a flaw in the dream. Instead of adjusting the dream, they were trying to adjust the law. Henry filed for an injunction on day 11. The response from their attorney came fast and thick, embossed letterhead from a firm in Hartford. The argument was exactly what Caleb had hinted at. The gate did not constitute a true obstruction because I had been offered a code. Therefore, access was not denied, merely regulated. Regulated. I asked Henry if that held any water. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. If the language said reasonable access, they'd have a shot. But it doesn't. It says unrestricted. That word's not decoration. Still, court takes time. 6 weeks passed before we got a hearing date. In those 6 weeks, the house rose from foundation to frame. I drive up to check my boundary lines and see it taking shape through the trees, all glass and timber beams. And every time I punched in that code to open the gate, I felt something twist in my gut. It wasn't the inconvenience. It was the principle, the quiet message that I was entering their domain, not exercising my own right. Marissa finally spoke to me one afternoon. I had stopped just inside the gate to wait for a logging subcontractor, and she walked down the driveway with their golden retriever. You really couldn't just use the code? She asked, not hostile, just tired. It's not about the code, I said. It feels like it is, she replied. We moved here to get away from constant traffic. Constant traffic? I said gently. It's me. And a few trucks during harvest season. She looked past me at the road, then back at the house. We didn't know, she admitted. The realtor made it sound minimal. There it was. A crack in the story. They should have shown you the deed, I said. It's recorded. She nodded slowly. Caleb thinks if we just formalize it, everyone will feel better. I already have it formalized, I answered. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked back toward the house. For the first time, I wondered if she'd been sold a version of the property that didn't quite match reality. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in late April. Mud season in full swing. The courthouse smelled like wet coats and old wood. Judge Elaine Porter presided. Mid-60s, sharp eyes, grew up 2 towns over. She understood logging roads the way some judges understand zoning in Manhattan. Henry presented the deed language first. Clear, direct, permanent, non-exclusive, unrestricted. Their attorney argued that modern security concerns justified reasonable protective measures and that providing a code maintained functional access. Judge Porter asked one question. Is there any language in this easement that conditions access on permission or technological entry? No, Your Honor, their attorney admitted. She flipped through the documents for less than a minute. The easement is unrestricted, she said. A locked gate, even with a code, constitutes an obstruction. The defendants are ordered to remove the gate within 14 days. Failure to comply will authorize the plaintiff to remove it at defendant's expense. It was clean. No drama. No raised voices. Just law applied to facts. Outside the courthouse, Caleb caught up to me on the steps. You really going to push this? He asked. I didn't start it, I said. We're trying to protect our home. And I'm trying to access mine. He shook his head. This is going to make things awkward. It already has, I replied. 14 days. I didn't drive down the road for the first week. I figured they deserved time. By day 10, the gate was still standing. Cameras still blinking red at night. On day 14, I parked at the entrance and sat there for a long time, engine off, listening to wind in the pines. Part of me hoped they'd take it down at the last minute. Save everyone the embarrassment. They didn't. That evening I called Henry. They've had their chance, I said. He didn't hesitate. Then we follow the order. We notified the county sheriff, not because I expected violence, but because paperwork likes witnesses. I also called a local contractor named Russ Bennett, a quiet guy who runs heavy equipment like it's an extension of his arm. You free Friday morning? I asked. What are we moving? He said. A gate. There was a pause. The legal kind? He asked. Court order in hand, I said. He chuckled softly. I'll bring the dozer. The night before, I barely slept. Not from fear, from the weight of it. Rural communities have long memories. I wasn't just removing steel and stone. I was drawing a line in public. At dawn, fog hung low over the road. Russ unloaded the bulldozer with slow, deliberate movements. The sheriff's cruiser idled nearby. Henry stood off to the side, coat collar up, a folder tucked under his arm. I walked up to the keypad one last time and entered the code. The gate swung open with a smooth electric hum. I stepped back, folded the court order, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Ready? Russ called from the cab. I looked at the stone pillars, the cameras, the metal bars gleaming in the early light. Yeah, I said quietly. Let's clear the road. Russ didn't gun the engine or make a show of it. He eased the bulldozer forward like he was approaching a fallen tree after a storm. Calm, methodical, no emotion in it. That's what I appreciated most. This wasn't revenge. It was execution of an order. The steel gate met the blade with a screech that echoed through the trees. For a split second it held, flexing under pressure, and then the hinges gave way with a sharp metallic snap. One pillar cracked down the center, stone splitting like old bone. The keypad box tore free and dangled by a wire before sparking out against the dirt. 5 minutes. That's all it took. The cameras blinked once more and went dark. The sheriff watched with his arms crossed. Not bored, not entertained, just present. Henry scribbled a few notes, documenting compliance with the order. Russ backed up, nudged the debris aside, and flattened the disturbed gravel with 2 clean passes. By the time the morning fog lifted, the road looked like it had never been gated at all. Except it had. Caleb and Marissa pulled up just as Russ was shutting down the engine. Their SUV stopped hard near the county line, gravel popping under the tires. Caleb stepped out first, face flushed, jaw tight. Marissa followed more slowly, eyes moving from the broken stone to the blade of the dozer. What the hell is this? Caleb demanded. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. You had 14 days, I said. I pulled the folded order from my jacket and handed it to him. Judge Porter was clear. He scanned the paper like he was looking for a loophole that might magically appear between the lines. You destroyed private property, he said. You failed to remove an unlawful obstruction, Henry replied smoothly from behind me. As authorized, my client remedied it. Caleb looked at Russ, at the sheriff, at the leveled gravel. You think this is over? He said to me. It was over 14 days ago, I answered. For a moment, I thought he might say more, might escalate it right there on the road. But Marissa touched his arm. Not forceful, just enough. Let's go, she said quietly. They got back in the SUV and drove up toward the house without another word. When the sound of their engine faded, the woods felt different. Not quieter exactly, but settled. Like something that had been out of alignment had clicked back into place. I'd like to tell you that was the end of it. Clean resolution. Neighbors wave again. Lesson learned. It wasn't. 2 weeks later I was served with papers. Caleb had filed a civil claim for destruction of property and emotional distress. The amount wasn't astronomical, but it wasn't pocket change either. He argued that the removal was excessive, that alternative remedies should have been pursued. Henry didn't even blink when I brought the envelope to his office. Some folks can't stand losing, he said, especially publicly. The hearing lasted less than an hour. Judge Porter dismissed the claim outright. The prior order had been clear. Noncompliance had consequences. She also awarded me legal fees and ordered reimbursement for $4,200 in road repairs, citing evidence that their construction traffic had caused significant deterioration. When we stepped outside the courthouse that day, Caleb didn't approach me. He walked straight to his car, shoulders tight, and drove off without looking back. Summer came and went. The Whitakers finished their house. It was beautiful, I won't deny that. Floor-to-ceiling windows catching sunset light. A deck that wrapped around like open arms. From a distance, it looked like a magazine spread. But something had changed. They no longer waved when we passed. Contractors stopped showing up. The house sat quiet most weeks, blinds half drawn. Rumors drifted through town that they hadn't anticipated the realities of rural living. That isolation feels different when it's not curated. One evening in late October, I saw a real estate sign near the entrance. For sale. It stayed there through winter. By spring, the property had sold. Different buyers this time. A retired couple from upstate New York who came by my place with a pie before they even moved in. We just want to introduce ourselves, the husband said, and make sure we understand how the road works. We sat at my kitchen table with the deed spread out between us. I explained the easement, the maintenance schedule, the logging seasons. They listened, asked questions, took notes. Before they left, the wife smiled and said, "Seems straightforward enough." It was. And that's the thing about all of this. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it went down. If I could have just used the code and avoided the fight. Maybe I could have. Life might have been quieter. Fewer court dates. No bulldozer at dawn. But here's what I keep coming back to. If I had accepted that keypad, even politely, it would have shifted the balance. It would have turned a right into a favor. And favors can be revoked. Rights, when they're written clearly and defended properly, endure. I don't hate Caleb and Marissa. I don't even think they were villains. I think they bought into an idea, a version of country life that didn't include shared access or old legal language drafted decades before they ever imagined owning land out here. When reality contradicted the dream, they tried to bend reality. I get that. In a way, I almost sympathize with it. We all want control over the spaces we call ours. But ownership has layers. Out here, land carries history. Old timber routes. Recorded easements. Generations of handshake agreements backed by ink and county stamps. You can build a house in 6 months. You can't rewrite 70 years of recorded access because it feels inconvenient. The morning that gate came down, I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't grinning behind the bulldozer. I felt steady, certain, a little sad, if I'm honest. Not because the gate was gone, but because it had ever been put up in the first place. There's something about rural communities that depends on a quiet understanding. You respect the lines on the map, and you respect the people who were there before you. Not because they're better, just because continuity matters. 2 years later, when I drive down that road, it's just gravel and trees again. No stone pillars, no cameras, just a shared strip of earth doing what it's always done, connecting one piece of land to another. Sometimes I think about how close I came to letting it slide. How easy it would have been to punch in a code and tell myself it wasn't worth the trouble. And then I imagine what happens the next time someone decides to regulate something that was meant to stay open. So here's what I'm curious about. If you were in my boots, would you have fought it? Or would you have taken the code and called it peace? At what point does compromise become surrender? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear where you stand on it, because out here, lines in the dirt can turn into lines in the sand real fast. And if you've ever dealt with neighbor disputes, easements, HOAs, or someone trying to redraw boundaries that were settled long before they arrived, share your story. These situations are rarely black and white, and I think we all learn something by hearing both sides. If this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. There are more lessons buried in back roads than most people realize.